Hello, everyone, and good evening. Welcome to another Directors Panel series. Tonight, we are going to be focusing on Indigenous rights and education, shared responsibility. We have a great cast here this afternoon to speak with you about Indigenous rights and education. And I'm so excited to hear the conversation that they're going to have. I would like to acknowledge the Board of Trustees and all the great work that they have done in leading the Halton District School Board to a new multi-year strategic plan. And of course, outlined in that plan is Indigenous rights and education. And so we're going to be talking about this, exploring it more, and we hope that by the end of it, we will all have learned more and be on our way towards truth and reconciliation. So we begin by acknowledging the land and our responsibility to care for and respect all that provides us with life. This land upon which HDSB is situated is on the ancestral, treaty, and title lands of the Anishinaabeg, Ojibwe, Mississauga Nation, now known as the Mississaugas of the Credit. Mississauga territory in the past and present continues to host both Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. The HDSB is committed to continuous knowledge building with respect to actions that address and resolve the ongoing impacts of colonialism. We do this by learning and understanding the true history, treaty obligations, duties and responsibilities, and Indigenous rights, while actively maintaining mutually beneficial relationships and collectively respecting and caring for the land.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you, Director Ennis, for starting us off with that beautiful land acknowledgement and the beautiful welcome. My name is Gabriela Echeverria Campillay, and I get the great pleasure of being a part of this beautiful discussion this evening. I want to start off with some words of gratitude, especially for the invitation. Director Ernest, I know you have many people who participate in your director's panel series, and it's really a privilege to be a part of it with this amazing team. Really nice to be here with my team and to be able to just do some reflections and have some listeners who I know have great respect for the director's panel series, and then also a great respect for the work, any work around social justice, and in particular this evening about Indigenous rights. And so I'm really grateful to all those listeners out there as well. Before we get started, I want to let you know that this is not our full team. I'm really grateful for all those who could participate this evening, but we have 6 additional people that are joining us behind the scenes. They're sending their good intentions and good thoughts by watching and tuning in tonight, and also are a big part of the work that we do. We couldn't do it without them. So later, I hope I'll be able to give them a shout out. I know they'll be embarrassed to hear their names, but I think it's important to also acknowledge them. So to get us started, we thought we would just open up with introductions and whatever that means to people. For me, I always appreciate when people allow time to introduce ourselves in our wholeness. And so what I'd ask and invite each of you on the team to start off by introducing yourselves, share your name, your role, any additional information that you'd like to share, anything about work, and then why it's important for you to engage in Indigenous rights and education. So in whatever way that unfolds or evolves for you, please share. If it's okay with people, privilege my voice here and start us off with the introduction. So like I shared with you, my name is Gabriela Echeverria Campillay. I am Diaguita. I was born in the Atacama region. I don't live there currently. I live on Mississauga territory. And we came to the north seeking refuge. And so my family ended up living on many Anishinaabeg territories up in Northern Ontario. And so I'd also like you to know that I am about 15 years in the principal role. That I know makes me sound like I'm a little bit on the older side. I'd like to consider it as wisdom. I often say I think it's wisdom, approaching wisdom. But I get the privilege to serve, and over the last 3 years, I've had the privilege to serve in the central principal role for the Indigenous Rights and Education Department, and I get to help with this important work. It's always been a part of who I am. I've always found ways to do it, either as a teacher or in the role of administrator, and now in the central role. It just doesn't go away. It just is who I am. And so it's my privilege to be able to serve in this capacity, and engage in the vision work and setting direction work, along with we have a council, Indigenous Education Council, that helps us, as well as a great many community voices that help us as well. And so it's my great privilege to work with everybody. So I'm going to just turn it over to another one of our team members. I have Jenny here up on my screen, who's next. Jenny, if I can hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Gabby. My name is Jenny Petco, and I am the Superintendent of Indigenous Rights and Education, as well as Human Rights, Equity, and Inclusive Education. And just so you know, I also serve a family of schools in the East Oakville area as well. And I will not go into details around my all the years and where I've been, but needless to say that I've been in education for 30 years and in various roles. But the role that has been an honor and a privilege of a lifetime has been serving as superintendent in Indigenous Rights and Education. And I'll share with you why. I think all of us, whether we're in education or not, we know that we desire to leave the world in a better place, in a better condition than the way we found it. That's an expression that we've all heard in some form or another at some point in our lives. And so when you hear tonight from members of this department, what you will see and feel and hear is a real desire to create a more inclusive and equitable society and space for students at Halton District School Board. And in endeavoring to do that, we know that the only way to achieve this is truly to ensure that Indigenous peoples are not just surviving, but are thriving through Indigenous sovereignty and self-determination. And so what I want to say is that each of us that are privileged to occupy the roles that we are in to serve students and families, we are deeply committed to improve access to education for Indigenous students at Halton District School Board and to support First Nation, Métis, and Inuit student achievement and well-being. And this includes what the government has promised, and that is in closing the achievement gap between Indigenous students and all students, and increasing every student's and staff's knowledge and awareness of Indigenous histories, cultures, perspectives, and contributions. And I also want to say, before I pass it on to the next member of our team, that you will be hearing from a deeply committed group of both Indigenous identifying and non-Indigenous identifying allies who have been passionate and committed to moving the work. So having said that, Gabby, who would you like me to turn that over to?
Thank you.
Or perhaps you can pass it on.
Sure. Thank you, Jenny. Rob, why don't we hear from you?
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Rob Brooksby. I'm an instructional program lead with the Indigenous Rights and Education Department. I am English on my father's side. On my mother's side, I'm Mi'kmaq. I've been teaching in Halton for about 18 years, and 2.5 of those have been with the Indigenous Rights and Education Department. And I really do, I feel really fortunate to be a part of this right now. I know growing up, this type of education, at least for me, didn't exist. And I feel that was a real disservice for me, for everybody. Indigenous people were found in history books or referring to people in faraway nations. Certainly didn't learn anything about Indigenous rights, certainly not residential schools or anything like that. So this knowledge is really important. It's really important to share this. It's really important that people understand why it's important And so I just feel really fortunate to be a part of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Carrie?
Thank you. Hi, my name is Carrie Hansen, and I'm also instructional program leader with the Indigenous Rights and Education Department. I've been with the Halton District School Board for just over 20 years now. I started off actually before my teaching career as a tutor in the classroom for the school board to gain my experience for Teachers College, and then started off as a French immersion teacher for grades 1 to 5, then special education resource teacher for junior intermediate. I'm also a mom of 2 children, one in secondary and one in elementary. A little bit about my background. So on my mother's side, we're Irish and French, and on my father's side, we are Scottish and English, and also my father's side, they are members of the Mohawks of Bay of Quinte. So I appreciate that this discussion is called a shared responsibility, because this really is everyone's work. And the responsibility to this work in particular, and the importance comes from the students and the families we serve in the board. And it's also anchored in calls to action and making curriculum on residential schools and treaties and Indigenous peoples' historical and contemporary contributions known to students, right from kindergarten right up to grade 12. And so as a team, we're able to reach staff and students across HDSB and share this knowledge and continue to learn and grow in our own knowledge and understanding, which is also incredibly important.
Thank you, Carrie. Tracy, you're next.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. I'm Tracy O'Connell, and I'm also an instructional program leader for Indigenous Rights and Education in the area of student achievement for students from kindergarten right up to grade 12. And I've been teaching in the board for 22 years. I think this work is important because we all need to work together toward HDSB's commitment to protecting and upholding Indigenous rights. The calls to action as outlined by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. And personally, my work within the board and with Indigenous students and families has allowed me to help fulfill the calls to action. So it's been a great privilege through my role as an educator. And I think I'm passing it to Tammy.
Yeah, thank you, Tracy.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Ani Kinawea. Hi, everyone. I'm Tammy Hardwick. I'm a Odawa Anishinaabe, Shishigwaning and Dontuba, Mako and Dodem. So I am Odawa Anishinaabe. Shishigwaning is my reserve, and it is located on Manitoulin Island, and I'm of the Bear Clan. I'm also an instructional program lead, and in our department, I'm in the role of the Indigenous education lead. And people have spoken about what's really important to them, and I think a lot of that kind of overlaps with why I do this work. In conversation today, we were even talking about how this is really heart work, and it means a lot to me. Like this speaks to my heart, to my family, because I think of the impacts of colonization, residential schools, Indian day schools, missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and Two-Spirit, and that fear of being removed by Indian agents. That's all. These are all some of the impacts that have happened to people within my family. So that's why this is like extremely important work to me, because I think of all of my family members who are growing up and are in the education system, and we really want that experience to be much different for them. As Rob said, education was very different for myself. This wasn't a part of our learning experience. If there was any mention of Indigenous peoples, it was, at the surface level, it might have included negative stereotypes or was pan-Indigenous. So really, there was a lot of erasure of those truths and realities. So, when I think back to when I became a student teacher, and I wanted to make sure, I think like at every placement. I wanted students to know who I was, my identity, because I wanted them to be proud of who they are. And I wanted students to engage in the learning about the truths of the past and the realities of today, and to know all of those amazing Indigenous folks that are out there. So what I really hope, is that all Indigenous students can enter into HDSB spaces and feel supported and successful in every aspect of their educational experience, and that they feel that their voices are heard and reflected in curriculum in their classrooms, in the work that we do, and what we promote within our school board, because it is, it's beyond curriculum. It's about, enhancing those outcomes for Indigenous students and benefiting everyone. So I think, that's really what brings me to this work. And then, thinking of everything that everyone has added, and how you have come into this department. Like, I've been here for 10 years now. Um, and then some of you have come in for 3 years. Uh, Other people have come into our department within just this year, but we're all adding something. And I think this really leads into that next section when we're talking about, what has been that journey of the work for First Nations, Inuit, and Métis education in the HDSB. And you're all a part of that. You're all a part of that amazing journey. And as someone who has been um, in this role for, like I said, a number of years, it's changed and it's evolved. And I think it's been a really amazing journey so far. And I can't wait, to see how it just continues to evolve as things move forward. When I first started working here, there had been 2 other Indigenous leads before then, and I think Sherry Sayville was the first person, and it was shared between our board and the Halton Catholic board. And now Sherry works with just the Halton Catholic District School Board. And after that, Nick Bertrand came in, and Nick is now the Director of Indigenous Education with the Ministry of Education. So pretty amazing people who have started that work and laid that the groundwork with staff, engaging with students, and starting to build relationships. And we know that relationships are one of the most important things when we do this work. And it takes a long time to build, to cultivate, and to nurture that, because it's really reciprocal, right? In that work that we do, it's so important that we have those relationships with the treaty holder, and with Indigenous experts, so that we can do this well, because we need to learn and we need to listen as we move forward. Some of the things, other things that I think about on this journey, and how the work has evolved within the HDSB is really, we have that framework that was put out by the ministry in 2007. And that's where the Indigenous leads started. And it had always been, as Jenny pointed out, about closing those gaps, about that student achievement and well-being, and for everyone engaging in the learning. And it really, evolved. Some of the work we did early on, we wouldn't do now, because, we've learned, we've grown. It's gone from a department of one to a huge department where we can get into all areas and support, staff and students across the system. And I think, we also moved into more of a rights-based approach, so that we uphold Indigenous rights. And it's even built into our multi-year strategic plan. So when we look at the first iteration of that multi-year strategic plan that included Indigenous awareness and perspectives from 2020 to 2024, to now, where it has even leveled up, it's now, the Indigenous rights and education commitment area. It has it's really made our work so much more visible. People engage more with us. We get tons of reach outs, and that's because it has given people entry points all across the system, no matter where they are, no matter what role that people hold. because it's our responsibility, right? It's everyone's responsibility to uphold that. And even, I think about the final report by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and it states that the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples is the framework for reconciliation at all levels and across all sectors of Canadian society. So that's where our responsibility is, to uphold Indigenous rights as a part of our work to address the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action. So really, that growth from being, single lead, to our rights-based approach, to the multi-year strategic plan really taking shape and becoming a part of the Halton District School Board has been tremendous growth, for the work that really drives it within our board. And I think, when I think of people who can speak to that, I think Carrie, if you could really, draw in on how that actually lives within schools and classrooms, that would be fantastic.
Definitely. Thanks, Tammy. Yeah, you're mentioning the reach outs from educators, administrators. It's been incredible. And you also mentioned, answering those calls to action. So that's what we're doing. And we're also digging into the many curriculum updates in elementary and secondary as well. That are now including learning about First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples, and not just in history and social studies, but we're seeing it in language curriculum in elementary and secondary as well. So we have a co-plan, co-teach model with our amazing itinerant resource teachers on the team. They meet with educators to co-plan and co-teach lessons grounded in Indigenous rights. And we're always working from a place of assuming that we have Indigenous students in our classrooms, because we know that we do. And in elementary, for example, we plan by selecting books by Indigenous author and look at the ways in which a lesson can be taught, and where the cross-curricular connections are, and how it's working to uphold Indigenous rights. So one example recently was we worked with a team of educators who teach grade 2. And we chose a book from an Indigenous author for their literacy program. It also tied back to areas of their science curriculum. And so there's that cross-curricular piece as well. And so we're able to use this book in multiple ways to support their program, again, highlighting the brilliance and contributions of Indigenous authors. This book was also dual language. And so when I say dual language, I don't mean English and French. I mean, it's written in Anishinaabe-Moan and English. And we also pointed out that by sharing this with students, we're upholding language rights and language revitalization that is happening. We also make sure to introduce the nation that the author and the illustrator are from, so that when we read a book, students are familiar with different nations across what is now known as Canada. And this upholds rights around nationhood. The itinerant resource teachers also support with how to critically look at resources and materials and best practices to reduce harms for Indigenous students. So this work is, very important for Indigenous students. It's also important for non-Indigenous students, as we just heard, from Rob and from Tammy, that we hear a lot from staff that they weren't taught this in school. And, they feel so fortunate and grateful that HDSB has this commitment to learn about true history and commit to continuous knowledge building. So that's a little bit about what's happening in classrooms. Rob, did you want to speak to the system work?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think, yes. So what's happening in the class is like you say, it's super important. It's happening all the time. There's a great team doing it. I also wanted to bring some attention to the Truth and Reconciliation Committee's call to action 57. It calls on all the levels of government to educate public servants about the true histories, including the history and legacy of residential schools, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, treaties, rights, more. And so to this end, we work collaboratively with a lot of different departments to provide that education to employees right across Halton District School Board. So that would be our like our educators, yes, and our administrators as well, but also including corporate staff and even our board of trustees to get this education as well. And most importantly, we've been working pretty hard and pretty closely with and I've got a list here, and I hope if I've left anybody out, please don't hold it against me. But we've been working closely with elementary school programs, special education services, secondary school programs, human rights and equity and inclusive education, information services, as well as the environmental sustainability, to provide PD on artificial intelligence through the lens of Indigenous rights and education. So I think what this shows is that what we're doing is it's for everybody, and it's being called for by it was called for by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and it's for everybody from from preschool age right up right all the way through the school board. So once again, I just really feel fortunate that I'm able to be a part of that. Thanks for that, Carrie. And did you want to add to that, Gabby?
Sure. Thanks, Rob. Thanks for capturing all of that amazing collaboration that happens. I also wanted just to carve out some time just to give a shout out to those other team members, because we've been talking about them. We've been talking about the work that they do. So I'm going to start with we have this incredible student support coordinator who is an amazing mentor and guide and lead for students. And her name is Tanya Vardy. And she works out of a few of our secondary sites and does great connections with community, creates community access for our Indigenous identifying students and families, offers a whole host of community events. And so really want to give a shout out and real big thank you to all that she does. She's an integral part of this. And you heard some discussions around classroom lessons and curriculum and things that teachers will deliver. And so we have this mighty team of 4 instructional resource teachers that go right into the classroom, and they sit down with your teachers and they look at curriculum and then co-plan something and then co-teach something and talk about student interests and student gifts. And so a big shout out to them. And they are Sarah Ferguson, Lisa Minnie, Joanne Arkand, and Rosemary O'Malley. We also have another helper that works with student mental health and well-being and helps us connect with community services as well. And she's in the social work role with an Indigenous student focus. And her name is Edna Pikarang. And so a big shout out to Edna as well. And then we have our amazing office helper who helps us with all the things behind the scenes, ordering resources for schools and, coordinating release time and a whole bunch of coordinating food delivery for families that when we're having community gatherings and making sure that all of those things get done properly. And that's our office helper, and her name is Ruth Gateskill. And so big thank you to all those people. Hopefully I haven't left anybody out. But I want to bring back the discussion to that collaboration, because when we look at the new multi-year strategic plan, and just like Director Ennis said, it's a big thank you to all those involved and saw the vision that's really connected to what's needed with to service Halton District School Board students and families. And what I have in mind is that circular image. And it really is modeling that all of the commitments are integrated. And I remember my first year living in Halton, and I was, I think I was an occasional teacher. I hadn't had a full-time contract yet. I came in partway through the year to help a teacher who was doing a maternity leave. And first thing I went to was a library, and I was thinking, I think I was teaching grade 3, and I was looking for resources. I was looking for resources by Indigenous authors and picture books. And I was big on picture books because any age student can learn through picture books. And I didn't find any resources that were authored by Indigenous authors, and it was really lacking. And I remembered speaking to the teacher librarian at the time, and I said, well, where can I find these? And she told me about this great center called the Woodland Cultural Center. And so there I went. And they didn't ask me for anything. They didn't ask me for my ID. They were so welcoming. They just, no library card needed. They trusted me. I walked away with, I think, 12 books and created this, like unit connected to literacy. And I know it goes beyond literacy, but I share that because the work is really cross-curricular and cross-departmental. Everyone can play a part in responding to Indigenous rights and Indigenous education. And I also want to mention that there are also corporate people that deal with servicing the corporate side of education, those helpers that you may not see up front. Students may not see them in their schools or in the classroom. They also play a role as well. And so I would like to give a big thank you to departments like the Planning and Facilities Department. How that reach out happened was we got a call, and one of the lead managers said, I don't know how we're going to work together, but I think we should work together. And there it just built from there. And it was such a beautiful relationship that started, and it continues. Every year they check in. Every year we do a sort of temperature gauge and talk about what's coming and how we can continue to work together. Another department from the corporate side is the communications department. They'll reach out over anything like flyers, anything public facing that has to do with messages around Indigenous education. And we so appreciate that, because what we try and do sometimes, especially as we're learning, sometimes we may not know that images may not actually capture contributions and excellence and brilliance and the focus that we have for students. And so we work together at coming up with messages or language, text, and images that reflect the work that we're doing. Also, library services has reached out, and that one is really important because they offer tons of resources across the region. And they have reached out and said the same thing. We know it's important that we work together. Let's connect every year. And with them, we connect fairly regularly. We've taken a few trips up to the bookstore called Good Minds, and we've talked about and did lessons together, learning around what resources our board needs for our schools need. And we've also heard from the staff well-being department under human resources. And so again, the same idea is we want to work with you. Not sure what that's going to look like yet, but let's co-develop. And so we often say, invite us, please call us in early, even though you may not have the answers, and call us in often, because we'll co-design something together. And so that message around integration and collaboration is so, so important in this work. We're truly operating from a rights-based approach. It really needs to be woven into all the actions, vision setting, and practices that the system has. And so I'm also wanting to hear a little bit more about the student perspective. And so I'm going to ask Tracy to also contribute on the collaboration piece around students.
Thanks, Gabby. When you were talking and giving all those amazing examples, and when Rob was talking about artificial intelligence, and I'm thinking about being responsive within the system and how, as we learn, we can do better. And when I think about working with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis students and families, the most important part for me is relationships and being responsive to what their needs are. So some of the ways that we engage with our students and families is we're committed in HDSB to fostering and promoting voluntary and confidential Indigenous student identification. And for a variety of reasons, people may choose not to self-identify, and that's completely okay. That's their choice. It does enable us to reach out to families to ensure that they are aware of the support that we give, as well as opportunities to gather as a community. And it helps us to determine if the ways that we are supporting students and trying to be responsive to students and breaking down barriers is having a positive impact, because we can connect with those students and those families. So if you are an Indigenous family and you're not receiving emails from us and reach outs from us, it may be that you're not part of that list. And if you would like to be, please contact us at any time. We're really happy to hear from you, and we can set that up. We also work a lot at removing barriers to student well-being and student achievement. And in HDSB, we have many amazing services for students. And for a variety of reasons, the services we offer may not always match the needs of all of our students, or they aren't able to access them for some reason. So identifying and then removing barriers so that students can access the services that we have, and determining what other supports are needed to support achievement is an important part of our work, and the work that we do in collaboration with various departments and school teams. We have so many examples in Halton of areas that our students shine academically and who they are as people. Our students have won awards. They've flourished in our iSTEM program. They've won track meets, demonstrated innovation and perseverance and commitment. There's so much beauty and brilliance within our Halton community of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis students. And we want to ensure that all Indigenous students are able to shine. So we encourage families to connect with us for any reason, to brag about what their children are doing. And if there are things that they want to discuss about their child's achievement, we're there to help. And then one of my favorite things that we do is our community building. And our department works to build community among First Nations, Inuit, and Métis students and families by offering a variety of community events, working with various community members, and providing families with an opportunity to engage with each other. And sometimes they don't know other Indigenous families, and so it gives everybody an opportunity to come together. It's been great for us to engage with parents, with aunties, with grandparents, and others who are important to our students. So meeting everyone is one of my favorite parts of my role. I'm thinking of some examples of our mitten making and beading workshops, and how students and families come together and they're relaxed and they share some food and build connections and friendships and community. And it's great to hear when people look forward to reconnecting with those that they only get to see at these events. So, yeah, Gabby, are there other events that you want to highlight?
Yeah, I was thinking about that relationship piece and the community connections, Tracy. I want to just build a little bit upon that. And I was thinking about all the many opportunities that students have, which I'm really grateful for all the work that coordinating that goes on to be able to create these opportunities for families and students. And so I was thinking, well, in addition to connecting with our Indigenous Education Council and our Halton families, Indigenous identifying families that we're aware of. And like it was mentioned before, we know some people choose not to self-identify, and we have complete respect for that. But everyone is invited, whether you're on our self-ID list or not. If you hear about the community offerings for Indigenous families and you identify as Indigenous, you're welcome to come. So, we connect with our Indigenous Education Council and our Halton families, and we also try our very hardest to connect with our neighboring nations and community members from both Six Nations, the Grand River, and Mississauga community members. And one of the connections that we have is inherent rights holder that has been elevated by the Mississaugas of the Credit Council. And her name is Nancy Rowe. And I want to just give a shout out to her, but then also ask Director Ennis, you had visits with Nancy Rowe, and wanted to ask you about, what that means and the significance of that for you.
Wow, thank you so much, Gabby. That is a question that I don't need to reflect on much, because it really, I can speak from the heart. When Tracy speaks about beauty and brilliance, that exactly encapsulates the conversations that I have with Nancy. Absolutely just awe-inspiring brilliance. And every time I've had the opportunity to be invited to the Roundhouse and to visit her, I leave with such deeper knowledge and understanding, and I walk away feeling so inadequate, because she knows so much, and I leave with so little. But it's always such a joy and a beauty to be in her presence, because her deep intellectual thinking, yet coupled with a humanity that is a rare combination that I have often very seldom found. And so I am just so delighted that she has, worked with us as a board for these many years. And certainly we've invited her back to be with us in the Halton region. And I recall some of the words that she has spoken to us, because the work that you're all describing here tonight, she knows it intimately, and she sees it and recognizes it. And her words, not mine, she said that if there is a board in the province of Ontario that she would recommend to Indigenous families, it would be the Halton District School Board. And so what a privilege and what an honor for us to be in partnership with her doing this work, because she's been as much a part of this journey to where we are today as anyone else. And so we're grateful for that partnership. We hope that it's a long-lasting one that will never end. And I am just so delighted every time I get the opportunity to visit with her and to just share in that deep knowledge and understanding. Because even when you think that you know something, when you speak and you listen to Nancy, you realize that there's just so much more to know. And when I'm in her presence, I don't speak a lot. Even though she invites us to speak, because I just want to listen and to bask in all that great and deep knowledge and understanding. So what a privilege it's been for us as a board to have a treaty partner such as Nancy walk alongside us on this journey. Her heart is just so pure and so kind and so welcoming that I think everyone really should have the opportunity to experience what I've experienced and what all of you on this screen have experienced as well.
Thank you, Director Ennis. Wow, really, really kind words. I would echo that. Anytime that you can sit with Nancy, there's so much learning that happens, and the right thing to do is apply an intellectual humility and just listen, because you can learn so much. So, and really, the comment around having, Indigenous families choose Halton to send their students, that's what we really wish for everyone. We really wish for all students to, see themselves and want to be with us in Halton. And certainly there's lots of learning that has to happen, lots of unlearning that has to happen, but we have to take that approach of where we want to feedback and we want to grow together. And that's why every year we do a check-in. Every year we're trying to make connections with families and to make connections with our community members and our neighboring nations, to try to just hear, what's on your mind? What are your hopes and wishes? What would you like us to know and be mindful of as we work together? Because we have their children for 10 months out of the year, and that's a long time to be with them. And we want to make sure that we do our very best every day for them. And the other thing that I was thinking about is, in terms of gathering and community, we have Every September 30th, we offer students an opportunity, students who identify as Indigenous, to gather and just be in community if they wish to observe the day for National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. And sometimes we know Indigenous families might take their own time that day to observe, and they might be with their own families. And so they may not necessarily come to gather with us and other students. But that's an example of where it's really important, like especially being in an urban setting, to try and create these opportunities for students to gather. And often what we find is they make friends, and the families also make connections to each other, and then so the community starts to grow. So that's another sort of beautiful thing that we're really proud of offering, and we hope those of you who are listening, if you have that on your mind, September 30th, to gather in community, please let us know, and please join us. And the last thing I wanted to just talk about in terms of community, we also invite the program, that's the acronym is APSIP. And I was just going to hand it over to Tracy to unpack that, because her and Tanya Vardy are big people in coordinating that. And we don't have Tanya here, but Tracy, I wonder if you can talk about how students gather for that experience.
Absolutely. Thanks, Gabby. APSIP is it's a post-secondary trades fair for trades and post-secondary fair for Indigenous students. And oftentimes we think about looking at what's going to happen after high school when kids are in grade 11 or 12. But sometimes we have kids as young as grade 9, and parents will call us and say, can I bring my child? They're in grade 9, but they're really interested in what they want to do after high school. Is this a good place to bring them? And it really is. We often hear about the great opportunities that exist, the degree of help and resources that there are in post-secondary institutions and in trades pathways. And post-secondary institutions frequently change the offerings that they have for students. And so students will often connect with our department to support them as they choose their pathway, so that they can hear about what those updates are. Because that's just like the Halton District School Board is constantly changing and responding to student needs, post-secondary is as well. So we support students, and we again collaborate with schools so that students have access to all the wonderful HDSB services and supports that we offer. And what every student needs for their transition to post-secondary it's really unique. It's unique to them. So they may be looking at different trades that suit them. They might be looking at social work programs for Indigenous youth, or pathways to medical school. And they may also be looking for institutions that have made commitments and are fulfilling the calls to action and have more services for First Nations and Inuit and Métis students. So they're all unique, and we try to build those relationships, listen to kids, and give them as much support and guidance as we can as they make those decisions. So I think another one of the questions that came in was, how can people support the department's work? If you can speak to that, Carrie.
Yeah, thanks, Tracy. This is a question we get quite often after sessions for educators, as well as how can we support the department's work moving forward. And so I think that a great place to start is familiarizing yourself with the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, as well as the Truth and Reconciliations Commission on Commission's call to actions. It's a great place to start. It's foundational learning that supports our system with curriculum development, resource selection, student support, and, like we said, professional development. It also reaches beyond our board in a variety of sectors, as we're exploring with the new grade 10 business curriculum. So the expectation for companies and businesses is to uphold the right of free, prior, and informed consent. with Indigenous communities. So students are learning about a variety of areas that we all share this responsibility for. And perhaps if someone is not in education, they could look at how their own line of work intersects with the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, as well as the calls to action. I don't know if someone else has other great ideas as well.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'd like to just jump in. I don't have a lot to add to that, to be honest with you, but I just wanted to sort of to say as well, yeah, the United Nations Declaration of the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, Truth and Reconciliation, calls to action, extremely important that everybody know what these are. But I think it's also very important that people in the board, they know about it and they know how it impacts their work, and they know how they're involved in furthering that work. So I know Gabby was talking earlier about the communications and facilities. You know, library services. You know, they've got a role. They're looking at the materials. You know, and being taking a critical look at the materials they're using in schools. Doing the same thing, being able to put that critical eye on the materials that are being purchased for schools and for items that are being purchased for well for all of your pedagogy, right? But understanding you know how UNDRIP and the TRC calls to action play a role in that selection process. I mean, classroom teachers, especially, like they're right there in the classroom. They're passing knowledge on to students. So being able to locate misinformation or a Eurocentric bias in the text or the online resources that they're finding, I think is so very important. So yeah, I feel like having that knowledge and students being able to have those discussions and having that critical consciousness to maintain ongoing engagement in Indigenous rights in education. So, yeah, being aware of what those things are, and how it applies, how it's what it means to implement that in the education system. I don't know. Gabby or Tammy, can you maybe take that a little bit deeper for me?
Sure, I can jump in at this point. Was already thinking about a few other things I wanted to say as well. Yeah, I think when I think about the work, when we talk about responding to the calls to action and applying Indigenous rights, thinking about inherent rights, I think about really going deep. And what I mean by that is, I think we have worked at this, although it does take time and although there is still plenty of work to do, we've been working at this for a few years now. And I think that we're at a point where our actions need to be meaningful and their commitments need to be sustained, maintained, and they need to be deeper, so as opposed to being surface. So I know that for many schools and many educators and many students, perhaps they are at the very beginning stages of understanding why we might have calls to action. And a very first step is to really learn about the impacts of colonialism on this territory and the impacts of colonialism, across many nations. So I think once one spends some time learning and really trying to gain an understanding of the impacts, then you should also look at what would be meaningful actions. And right now, there unfortunately still remains a lot of work to do, a lot of barriers to remove, a lot of moving beyond awareness, actions that actually uphold rights. And so for me, I think moving beyond the surface level and getting into deeper work, deeper commitments, and deeper actions, which has to involve Indigenous voices. It has to involve connecting with our department. because our department has a whole host of voices behind us and around us, right? So we're connected with the Indigenous Education Council, connected with Indigenous families, connections with neighboring nations, treaty holder. And so that's why we ask people to connect with the department, because we have an awareness of what's been asked of us for this working year. And so deeper, more meaningful, and moving away from surface level. And I'm going to use the word performative, because I think for a lot of Indigenous communities, we know and we hear that the calls to action have been worked on for quite some time now. And yet we're still just only moving the needle slightly. And so that's what we mean by deeper actions and meaningful actions. Has to move away from that surface level and performative actions. And we have to become aware quickly and thoughtfully, and then also move into actions in collaboration. Tammy, did you want to add something to that? I can see you're ready to jump in.
I am ready to jump in, because I think it flows perfectly into really thinking about, we talk about taking an anti-colonial stance, right? An anti-colonial approach to our work. And one of the things, is to ask people to keep an open mind as to understanding what those words mean. And I think this is also connected to that moving deeper in the work. So when we speak about of anti-colonial practices, what we're really referring to is the ways that we can distance ourselves from those colonial barriers and reduce harms for students and staff within our system, because we know that, if we think of the word anti and colonial, we're trying to counter the impacts of colonialism, which we know, like residential schools, the Indian Act, 60s scoop, the millennial scoop, all those stereotypes and misconceptions and erasure that have happened. So we have to counter all of those impacts. And we really, in order to do that, you have to have that deep knowledge. So when we speak of the TRC calls to action, every single one of those calls to action were written for a reason, because colonialism has created an impact. And we're asking you to try to counter that, to undo it. So that's a part of it, right? That's a part of that anti-colonial approach. And what we do is we use that knowledge, because we sit in this work all the time, and we read lots, we learn, and we apply that. And that's what we ask, I think, of everyone, is to continue your learning, dig deeper, learn from Indigenous voices. But when we use that knowledge and we apply it on policies and practices. So I think of some of the work we've done with the Safe and Inclusive Schools department, right? And looking at the policies that have come up for review, and what can we put in there to ensure that an Indigenous student won't have a barrier, right? Or that a harm is reduced. Because that's what it's about, right? Making the betterment of educational experiences. So I think, we always think about Justice Sinclair and think of those words, right? That he spoke, how education got us into this, and education will get us out. So that's why I say, continue learning. That's how we're going to move forward as a collective. Yeah.
Thank you, Tammy. I am just noticing the time, and before we wrap up, I first want to say thank you to all of everyone's contributions and our listeners as well. But I also wanted to squeeze in a little bit of a shout out message to what's happening in June. So we all know that June 21st is National Day for Indigenous Peoples, and we also know that it's the summer solstice. And we want to tell you that a lot of things are happening in schools in preparation for that day. year. There's lots of centering of Indigenous people's contributions and excellence. Some schools are even having Autumn Peltier visit. We want to thank Autumn for, she's an environmental activist, and we want to thank her for her commitment to coming to Halton and visiting a few schools. And we also know that some families are focusing on connecting and getting their gardens ready, or planting season, and some of them are already well on their way and maybe doing a bit of harvesting already. So we know that June 21st means many things for many people. For Indigenous people, sometimes it's about observance as well and being together in community. And so we want to wish you a good June 21st or a good movement towards the new season, and hope that it is everything that you wish for. And so with that, I'll pass it over to Director Ennis.
Thank you so much, Gabby. I won't say something as profound as Tammy in quoting, Dr. Sinclair, but I remember when we used to go on road trips with our 4 young daughters, they used to ask the question, "Are we there yet?" And that question, I think, applies to us in this context. Are we there yet? And we know we're not there. However you define there, we know we're not there. But I'm confident that we're on the right path, and I'm excited that we're doing the right work. And I'm even more excited that we have the right people doing the right work for the right reasons. And so with that in mind, I know that you're inspiring hope, you're inspiring healing, you're giving students opportunities that will last a lifetime, that will be transformational. And for that, we're eternally grateful. And so we know that we need all of us working together, walking hand in hand, as we say, a shared responsibility. And so I can't thank you enough for engaging in this conversation this evening. And I know that we're going to continue to do the work, continue to walk along the path, and continue to get better. So with that, thank you so much for joining us.